The next thing we need to do for our program is create some structures to use for the billing information. So I'm going to go back up to the top and we'll create a bill structure. So we'll make it public and we'll call it bill. And that will have a name of a bill and the amount of the bill. I believe that was all the information we needed. Double check the user stories. So they want to add bills and we need to include the name and amount owed. So that should cover everything that we need for the billing information. Just to make this a little bit easier to use, I'm going to derive the debug and clone traits. Remember that the debug trait will allow us to easily print out the bill on the terminal, and clone will allow us to make copies of the structure. The next structure I'm going to make is one that actually contains individual bills. So this one's just going to be called bills with an S. So we have bill and bills, so multiple bills. This will have an inner value, and we'll just use a vector. It's going to be a vector that contains bills. We're not going to derive anything for the bills structure because we're going to be iterating through it later, and we don't need to have a debug printout of it at all. We now need to implement some functionality onto this bills structure. So let's create a new implementation for the bills. We'll start with the basics. We'll just create a new bills. And to do that, we just can use self, and we'll set the inner value to an empty vector. The next function I'll make is one to add bills. So let's call it add. We'll take a mutable reference to self, and we'll take a new bill, and we'll move the bill into this structure. So when we take a mutable reference to self, we're going to be accessing this inner value mutably, which means we can modify it. And when we take this bill here as an owned bill, we're going to be moving this bill into this vector. All we need to add for this is self.inner.push, and we'll just push the bill into the vector. We'll also need some functionality to print out the bills because we need to be able to view the bills. So for this one, I'm going to return a reference to the vector. That way the calling function can display things however it likes. So to do that, I'm going to create a new function called getAll. That's just going to take a reference to self so it can access the bills. It's going to return a new vector, and within the new vector, we're going to have references to the existing bills. So we're going to borrow the bills. That way the calling function can print them without any issues. To get a vector of the existing bills in a borrowed form, if we look here, we have owned bills, but we want borrowed bills according to this function signature. So what I'm going to do is iterate over the bills. So we'll call the iter function, and that's going to have references. So if we just iterate over it and collect it into a new vector, we should get borrowed bills automatically. And that's because when we call iter, it's automatically borrowed. And so this should work fine. I'm going to do a cargo check just to double check. And we have a bunch of warnings, but that's okay, but no errors, so that works fine. I'm going to double check the requirements to make sure that we have everything covered so far. So we need to be able to add bills, and we wrote a function to do that. And we want to be able to view existing bills, and we also wrote a function to return the bills, so therefore we can view them using that return value. Now that the functionality for those is implemented, we can go ahead and create the menus in the next video.